Have you ever been so locked into a shoot that the outside world almost disappears? Time slows down, your thoughts go quiet, and it's just you, your camera, and the scene in front of you. You're running around like a fox on a hunt, searching for that perfect composition, searching for that perfect angle to shoot at, and you are fully locked in, completely oblivious to anything happening outside of your immediate field of view. And then all of a sudden you snap out of it and your heart is still pounding and your veins are pulsing with dopamine. This is the photography flow state. And it's one of the best things that we can experience as photographers. It's also the time when we create some of our most compelling work as well, because we are totally focused on one thing, and that is capturing the scene in front of us in a beautiful way. But it's not always easy to fall into this creative state. And for some of you, you might not even operate creatively like this at all. Maybe you're someone that can just be super creative all the time and you don't have to fall into this creative flow state in order to capture something cool. But for me, I really struggle to create something if I'm not in this creative flow state. I feel like my brain takes over and I just can't translate my creativity into a good image because I can't even access that creativity to begin with, if that makes sense. But I think one thing that all of us can agree on is that sometimes when we go out to shoot, the creativity just feels natural. It comes easily and we can go out and be unique and experiment and capture something interesting. And other times when we feel like no matter how hard we try, we just can't break through that barrier and we can't seem to be creative during that moment. And over the years of really struggling with this, I've learned some things that we can do and also avoid doing in order for us to be more creative during our shoots so we can walk away with more interesting images. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today in this video. And at the top of that list is something that I think affects a lot of photographers that are just starting out, and that is focusing too much on the technical side of photography and not enough on the artistic or the subjective side of photography. Now, I've always broken photography down into two main buckets. There's the technical side, which is basically how to use your camera and choosing the right camera settings, and the artistic side, things like lighting, composition, subject matter, texture, all of the artistic or subjective elements of photography. And both buckets are incredibly important for us as photographers. The technical side allows us to get an accurate exposure, and of course it has a big impact on the artistic side as well, things like depth of field or motion blur through shutter speed and aperture. But I would argue that if you're not fully versed in how your camera works, fiddling around with your camera settings is going to distract you from the most important thing, which is the artistic side of photography, because those are the things that translate into a beautiful photo. I'm not saying the technical side of photography doesn't play a role in the outcome of that image. It absolutely does. But if you're too hyper-focused on your camera and you keep looking down at it to make sure that your settings are perfect, you're gonna be distracted from all the intricacies in the scene in front of you, where all of those artistic elements of photography are waiting to be captured. Things like lighting, composition, subject matter, those are the things that are gonna make your image stand out and be unique. So what is the solution to all this? Are you saying that, Sean, I need to go shoot in full auto mode so I'm not distracted by my camera? And no, I'm not saying that. Although in a lot of situations, I think shooting in full auto mode would honestly be fine, but I would never recommend giving away all of the creative control to the camera. And that's exactly why we do have half auto modes, things like aperture priority, shutter priority, these modes that allow us to select one or two of the main camera settings, and the camera will do everything else. It's a magical experience. And even today, I shoot most of my images in aperture priority, to the extent where with my Fuji X100V and X100VI, I don't think I've ever shot either of those cameras in full auto mode because I don't really see a point. I'm still using the internal light meter on that camera, so why not let the camera do a little bit more work to capture an even exposure, and I can focus on the most important thing, which 99% of the time is selecting my aperture to make sure I have a good depth of field in that image. Now, I think I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but the point of this point is that your camera settings, while they're important, they're not nearly as important as the artistic elements of photography. No one's gonna look at your photo and be like, dang, what a great use of aperture or shutter speed. No, they're gonna look at that image and think about how that image makes them feel. And oftentimes that feeling comes from the lighting in the scene, the subject matter in the scene, and the composition in the scene, because those are really the most important things that we have in our image. And if you guys wanna learn more about storytelling and photography, I did a massive tutorial on storytelling. I'll put a link to it. I forget which side it is. I think it's up there. Go up there to click that. It's a super detailed tutorial, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Now, next up on this list is overthinking your shots and your composition. And I know in the last point, I just told you that the most important aspect of photography is the composition, the lighting, the subject matter, all of those things. Yes, those are incredibly important things, and we do need to pay attention to them while we're shooting. But I do think it's a slippery slope, and it can become really easy for us to pigeonhole ourselves into capturing a specific look and not looking outside the box and experimenting and trying new things and discovering new creative ways to capture a scene. There was always a time in photography where we need to be cerebral and we need to think deeply about the scene in front of us, but there's also a time where we need to let go a little bit and rely back on our creativity and experiment a little bit to capture something truly interesting. And I think another way of looking at this is over planning a shoot, because if you go out on a shoot, you have all these things planned, you have this super detailed mood board, you know all the compositions that you want to capture, and then you show up and it's raining or something, and all of these creative ideas that you had are no longer viable. Well, what are you going to do? Are you going to sit there and mope, or are you going to let yourself free a little bit creatively and just experiment and try to capture something interesting anyways? I would argue that the latter is much more effective in capturing something interesting. And also in a lot of these situations, this is where you capture your best photos. This is when you fall into that creative flow state. It's when you don't come with a plan and you just take what's given in front of you and you make the best of it. And some of my favorite photos that I've ever taken was when I threw my plan out the window because I had shitty weather or something went wrong on the shoot, and I just relied on my creativity. I fell into that creative flow state and I captured something way more interesting than if I had stuck to my plan in the first place. So I think the point that I'm trying to make here is if you're overthinking your shots to the point where it's actually adding friction to that creative process and it's preventing you from falling into that creative flow state, I think it's important for us to kind of take a step back a little bit, take a breath, and look at the scene with new eyes. And back to that idea about friction, I think you'll see that all the points that I'm making in this video all relate to reducing friction during the creative process so we can be more creative during our shoots. We're not overthinking our scenes in one way or another, so we can really let that creativity out. And that's exactly why I get so much value out of the sponsor of today's video, Artlist, because they are constantly releasing new tools that remove friction from the creative process, allowing us to focus on the most important thing, which is creating engaging content. And their new AI video creator tool epitomizes this perfectly, as it allows us to create super high quality clips from scratch in just a few minutes, like this drone shot that I created of the Amalfi Coast in Italy, which is hands down one of the most beautiful places I have ever been. And I think the AI tool does an incredible job of making this scene look real. It is absolutely insane that we can create these shots without leaving our desk, and it has a ton of utility for us as creators as well. But I want to show you guys how I made this clip. So let's jump on the computer and I'll show you. Now, one of the first things you'll notice when you open up the AI image and video creator tool is the style catalog, and Artlist gives us a ton of preset styles that we can choose from and use as a starting point for our shots. Now, I've selected Cinematic Earth because I want to capture just a really cinematic drone shot that looks real, but they also have warm realism, which I played around with a little bit. That was super cool looking. But like I said, I'm going to go with Cinematic Earth here. And I have typed in a prompt, capture a photorealistic aerial drone shot of Amalfi Bay at sunset, emphasize the beautiful dramatic coastline and the small Italian houses on the cliffs. But there is also an enhance feature. And if I click enhance up here, it's going to take that prompt and it's going to add a lot more text and a lot more detail. And that gives us just a much more detailed prompt. So from there, I'm going to hit generate, and that's going to generate an image. And then from that image, we can go ahead and generate a video. And then once that image is done, we can just go up here and click animate. And that is going to open up another prompt box here that we can use to generate that video. Now, it already gave us a suggested prompt here. It says begin with a crane shot rising above the coastline. Let's say drone shot. Let's say coasting along the coastline. And I think that sounds pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and click animate. You can also adjust the duration. I set mine to 10 seconds, and the resolution, I'm gonna do full 1080p. Go ahead and click animate, and then you just have to wait a few minutes for that clip to be generated. And it usually takes just a few minutes. It's pretty quick, but once that clip is done, you can go ahead and view it. And this is perfect. It looks incredibly realistic. It's amazing that we can create these things these days. But what's cool about this is once you download the clip, you can use it absolutely anywhere. You can use it in paid work, free work. You are fully covered by Artlist license, so you don't have to worry at all. Now, Artlist literally just released this tool. It is brand spanking new, and they have a ton of updates coming in the very near future as well. So click the first link in the description to try out Artlist's new AI video creator tool and get access to hundreds of thousands of other digital assets that you can use to level up your videos as well. Thank you so much, Artlist, for sponsoring this video and supporting my content. Now let's get back to the video. Now, I've been talking a lot about overthinking in this video, overthinking your camera settings, overthinking your shots and your compositions, and just being a little bit too cerebral during your shoots. And I think that is certainly true. But one thing that is even more true is overthinking what your followers are going to think of your images, or thinking about all the external validation that you might get from the photos that you're capturing now. One of the worst things that you can ask yourself when you're out creating something is, are my followers gonna like this? Are they gonna like what I'm doing? Are they gonna think it's cool? Are they gonna think it's unique? And my response to this was, who cares? Who cares what other people think of your work? And this is something that really held me back in the beginning, to the point where I was having such a difficult time being creative because I was constantly thinking about what all these other people would think about my work. And it's still something I struggle with. Imposter syndrome is a real thing, and it absolutely sucks. And if you're seeking this external validation and you're thinking about this as you're taking your photo or as you're creating something, that is gonna pull you out of that scene faster than any other thing on this list. So I think it's really important to remember that everything you're creating for yourself. You're doing this because you love photography. Who gives a shit what other people are gonna think? If it matters to you and you think it looks cool, then ultimately that's all that matters. And I think all this really does come down to one thing, and that is comparison. And I'm sure you guys have heard the quote, comparison is the thief of joy, which is true, because if you're constantly comparing your work to other people, you can never fully enjoy the work that you've created or the work that you're currently creating. So don't worry about what other people are gonna think of your work, especially when you're actually actively creating that work, because that will pull you out of the creative flow state faster than anything else on this list. Focus on yourself, create what you wanna create, and enjoy yourself while you're doing it. Now, the next tip on this list is not giving yourself the space to be creative in the first place. And I think space can be defined in two different ways here, right? Our mental space, which we've talked a lot about in this video already, but also our physical space as well. The things that are physically around us that can either add or detract from our creativity. And also, I think time can be grouped into that category as well. There are so many physical distractions in our lives in this day and age, with the main one being our phone. And one of the things that I've started doing as I'm going out on a shoot is to actually turn off my phone and get rid of that distraction completely unplug from the outside world and focus on what's directly in front of you. But not only that, the people that we surround ourselves with as well have a big impact on our creativity. And if you're going out on a shoot and you're with friends that aren't there to take photos, it's gonna be difficult for you to focus on capturing that scene, because you're gonna have someone constantly talking to you and you're not gonna be able to fall into that creative state. Whereas if you go out and shoot with another photographer or alone, you're gonna be able to fall into that creative state a lot more and be way more focused on capturing that scene and being creative in the moment. But like I said earlier, I think time plays a big role in this as well, because if you're not giving yourself the time to create to begin with, and you're constantly worrying about getting back to work or getting home, and you don't give yourself the time to create, then you're not gonna be creative during that time, because you're constantly thinking about the next thing that you have to go out and do. So I think it's important for us to dedicate periods of time for creating and just saying, screw everything else. I'm sorry, like I'm focused on this, because that will allow you to really surrender yourself and be more creative during that time. Now, the last tip on this list has to do with inspiration. And I think as artists and as creatives, we rely very heavily on inspiration to inspire us to go out and create something in the first place. And if we don't feel inspired, then we're not gonna go out and create something, because we don't feel like we have the energy or the creative willpower to actually go out and do that. But one of the things that I've learned in my career is that inspiration is wildly unreliable, and it's not gonna be there for you when you need it every single time. And if you're just sitting around and waiting for inspiration to come around and motivate you enough to go out and create something, you're really selling yourself short, because oftentimes that inspiration is going to come through action. So instead of sitting around and waiting for that inspiration, go out and act, go out and shoot and try, even if you don't feel like it, because oftentimes you will start to feel inspired during that shoot while you're creating something, and that will in turn lead to more action and motivation, and it's just a positive cycle. So don't let the cycle start off with inspiration at every time. If you're feeling uninspired, that's probably the best time to go out and shoot something, because that will often lead to inspiration in the moment, and that will just continue onto this positive creative cycle where you're creating more and more interesting work over time. So if you're waiting around to feel inspired, you're gonna have a very difficult time falling into that creative flow state. So just go out and shoot and have fun and see where it takes you. Maybe you don't come away with something cool, or maybe you fall into the deepest photography flow state you ever have and you create some of your best work. You never know, you just need to go out and shoot. And I think this last point really shows us that flow is not always going to be effortless. You sometimes have to work hard to fall into this creative flow state where you're gonna create your best work. And sometimes we have to work a little bit to give ourselves the space that we need to actually fall into that creative state in the first place. Now, one of the things you'll probably notice noticed with all of these tips is that they're pretty much all related to mindfulness and being present in the moment and giving yourself the space that you need to be present in that moment while you're creating something. But I also think it's important to note that these aren't always going to be relevant. There might be shoots where you have to be super technical in that scene to walk away with good photos, and you can't just throw everything out the window and rely on your creativity and focus on lighting and composition and subject matter in order to capture a cool photo. Sometimes you do have to be a little bit more cognizant and a little bit more cerebral during that shoot to capture what you need. But I do think that we can all find value in these tips in one way or another, and it really all comes down to mindfulness and just being present while you're shooting those images and eliminating any kind of external factors so you can focus on the most important thing, and that's capturing beautiful images. But that is all for this video, guys. And I know this video was a little bit more philosophical than usual, but honestly, these are things that I think about when I'm out shooting, and sometimes I'll go out and I'll fall into this creative flow state and it feels so damn good, but I oftentimes don't give myself the space that I need to actually fall into that creative flow state to begin with. And really, truly, I capture my best work when I'm in that state. I don't know if it's because I have ADHD and that's just how I operate creatively, but I hope you guys can relate to this video in one way or another, and I hope you found it useful. But thank you guys so much for making it to the end of the video, and also thank you so much, Artlist, for sponsoring this video as well. I will catch you guys very soon in the next one.